Welcome back to Horrifying Stories. 7 high school boys were already about to complete their leadership and survival course in the Alaskan Wilderness. They were just trekking uphill along a creek, and as their feet waded in the cold spring water, out of nowhere, a big grizzly bear approached them fast and fiercely attacked them. This is their horrifying story. Viewer discretion is advised. It was summer of 2011. 7 boys joined a 30-day backpacking course through the Alaskan Wilderness as part of the National Outdoor Leadership School. In this trip, they will be immersed in the wilderness to learn skills on leadership and survival, as well as learn about wilderness medicine. The boys have been backpacking in the western part of the Talkeetna Mountains with 3 instructors. In the last week of their training, their newly acquired skills will be put to a test as the boys will be left to fend for themselves for 3 days. With no means of communication, they will try to find a train track 24 miles away where they will finally meet up again with their instructors. The team of 7 boys were Joshua BERG, 17 years old from New York, Samuel Gotzigan, 17 years old from Denver, Colorado, Samuel BOAS, 16 years old from Westport, Connecticut, Noah ALLAIRE, 16 years old from Albuquerque, New Mexico, Sam MELMAN, 17 years old from Huntington, New York, Victor Martin, 18 years old from Richmond, California, and Shane GARLOCK, 16 years old from Pittsford, New York. On July 23, 2011, as the boys were trying to find their way to get to this train track for their final test of survival, they happened to see a creek. Now, in the rules, they were not allowed to fish, but their instructors were not able to see them and won't know if they really followed the rules. So, on that day, the boys decided to have some fun in the creek. They all went in the water, playing around and just enjoying each other's company. They were trying to catch some fish using their mosquito nets. And indeed, they earned their little reward when they were able to successfully catch a pair of rainbow trouts. At around 7:30 in the evening, they decided to continue on with their hike. They decided to follow the creek along the water as it was easier than hiking in the forest. Leading the boys were Joshua BERG and Samuel Gotzigan. They all walked in one line. BERG was in front of them and then followed by Gotzigan. As they were walking, the water trail led them to a curve, and as they got to the end of the curve, BERG noticed something that looked like a bale of hay about 30 feet in front of him. And that bale of hay seemed to be moving and coming fast toward them. Then, he realized it was a bear. He turned around and shouted, "Bear!" He did not have time to run as the bear was already in front of him. It stood up on its hind legs and charged at BERG. The 7-foot-tall beast, weighing 500 pounds, flattened BERG on the ground, bit his head, and he heard audible cracks as his head was inside the bear's mouth. Now, during their survival training, they were taught that if they encounter a bear, they need to stand together to look big and make loud noises to scare off the bear. But at this time, they were caught off guard. The incident happened too fast, and their first instinct was to run and hide from the bear's sight. The boys ran separate ways. Some of them were hiding behind some bushes. As they listened to BERG's horrifying scream and the bear's growl, Sam Gotzigan looked back and saw how the bear was shaking BERG's body, trying to rip off his head. Gotzigan had a difficult decision to make. He can't continue to run away from the bear and get to a safe location, or to go back to help his friend and risk his life. As he froze and these thoughts were running through his mind, suddenly, the bear saw him and decided to let go of BERG and charge at Gotzigan. The bear moved so quickly that Gotzigan only made few steps before the bear got him. The bear went straight to his head and he tried to fight off. As he was wrestling with this bear, he somehow was able to pull away and tried to run, but he was not able to get far. The bear knocked him down on the ground and started to bite his hand, strike his neck, arm, back, and finally, the bear's claws smashed on his ribcage. The bear's sharp claws penetrated Gotzigan's skin and muscles and punctured his lung. Then, after all the havoc, suddenly, it was quiet. The screams were replaced by moaning, and it seems that the bear was gone. ALLAIRE, who was hiding on the shore, tried to peek to check the scene. He saw Garlock, BOAS, and MELMAN hiding up on a hill behind some bushes. He whispered to them and asked if they saw the bear. Garlock gestured that he did not know. ALLAIRE then decided to get out of hiding and run to BERG to try to help him. As he was closing in on BERG, out of nowhere, the bear suddenly launched an attack toward ALLAIRE. It struck its paws to ALLAIRE's head, ripping his scalp. Then, the bear bit his body with its lower teeth on the back and the upper teeth around its armpit and raised him up, violently shaking him, then slammed his body to the ground. It stood tall on its hind legs and was about to smash ALLAIRE once again with its paws. But it suddenly noticed BOAS, MELMAN, and Garlock up on the hill, and surprisingly, the bear ran away. As the bear was running, it saw Martin, who was already standing near GRIZZLY, and bit off his calf. It tried to drag Martin, but somehow he was able to kick off the bear's head and it ran away. Rain fell as MELMAN, who was up on the hill, saw the bear run farther away from them. As soon as the bear was surely out of their sight, the three boys ran down toward where their injured friends were. The first thing that went through their minds was the beacon. This emergency equipment would send an alarm to the Alaska Rescue Coordination Center, including a GPS of their exact whereabouts so rescuers could easily locate them. Apparently, BERG's injuries did not get the best of him. He was still as sharp as ever, as the three boys saw him on all fours slowly moving forward to where his backpack was to get the beacon. ALLAIRE also saw this, and despite blood dripping from his body, he ran toward BERG and helped him get the beacon from the backpack. BOAS took BERG's head and put it gently on his lap, while ALLAIRE and MELMAN tried to figure out how to turn the beacon on. They struggled to pull the red plastic tab that got stuck, but eventually managed to pull it out using Garlock's blade knife. Then, they took out the antenna, turned the beacon on, and everyone watched the beacon do its job, making sure it was working properly so they could get help in no time. ALLAIRE, who was also a lifeguard, then proceeded to check the extent of GRIZZLY's wounds. Surprised, he found out that GRIZZLY had this big wound to his chest made by the bear's sharp claws. It was so deep that it had caused a portion of his lung to collapse, and every time he breathed, air would come in through the wound in his chest. To prevent further damage to his lung, putting his knowledge about first aid to good use, ALLAIRE decided to cover the wound with a clean plastic bag and wrapped it around with a bandage to keep the wound airtight. BOAS continued to take care of BERG, keeping him still on his lap, hoping he did not suffer any injuries to his brain or spine. BERG suffered from a fractured skull, and his face was extremely disfigured that you would not recognize it was him. Feeling hopeless, BERG even asked MELMAN to grab his camera and take a video of him as he said his goodbyes to his family. Garlock, on the other hand, had just completed pitching their tent and called on the other boys to help him bring GRIZZLY and BERG into the tent. All of the other boys lent their clothes to the two wounded boys to keep them warm as they laid them down on their sleeping bags. While ALLAIRE was also injured, he just wrapped around a dressing on his own scalp and went back to nursing their injured friends. ALLAIRE, along with MELMAN, who once volunteered for a hospital's intensive care unit, and BOAS, the certified emergency medical responder, led the boys in their emergency mission to keep their friends alive until rescue came. BOAS focused on keeping BERG's head stable, while Garlock and Martin, upon their friends' orders, would apply pressure to GRIZZLY's chest, check for pulses, adjust their positions, and lie down beside them to keep them warm. Aside from using body heat to keep the two warm, the boys also peed into their water bottles and placed the bottles inside the sleeping bags of GRIZZLY and BERG. At one point, the three lead responders were in a bit of panic when ALLAIRE could not seem to find GRIZZLY's pulse. After failed attempts from his wrist and arm, ALLAIRE succeeded at getting a pulse near his groin. They all sighed with relief, but it wasn't long enough when GRIZZLY started to complain of the pain in his right ring finger, which also got bitten by the ferocious bear. The boys were getting nervous and impatient. Rain had not stopped and the temperature was beginning to drop, bringing all of them to shivers. The suspense was killing them, until they heard a whirring sound nearby, and a bright light was approaching in their direction. When the boys opened their tent, they saw a helicopter land 30 yards away from them. It was already more than 5 hours since the attack, around 2 in the morning. An Alaskan state trooper got off the chopper and introduced himself to be Michael Shelley. He assessed the scene and immediately concluded that their chopper was too small to accommodate the 7 boys. It wasn't also equipped for critical cases, so Shelley decided to stay with Gutzigan and BERG and another uninjured boy. ALLAIRE and Martin, who had minor injuries, would have to be flown out first along with GARLOCK. Initially, MELMAN volunteered to stay, but BOAS, having held BERG's head for hours, was persistent in staying. So, the first ones to fly out were ALLAIRE, Martin, GARLOCK, and MELMAN. With tears in their eyes, the boys exchanged their goodbyes, and the first 4 boys were evacuated to safety. At around 5 in the morning, as the sun was about to rise, a bigger helicopter landed near their tent to bring the critical care patients to safety. United States Air Force Special Operations Command Rescue Rangers quickly moved and placed Gutzigan and BERG into super-insulated rescue bags and carried them into the helicopter. BOAS and Shelley were also assisted in boarding the rescue chopper. What took the boys 1 month to explore, the chopper only covered in minutes as it brought the 3 remaining boys to safety. Thankfully, all 7 boys survived the ordeal. Martin was immediately discharged after being given medication for the wound on his leg. Gutzigan stayed in the hospital for 8 days. His collapsed lung had to be reinflated. He also sustained multiple broken ribs and 3 cuts on his chest cavity. BERG stayed in the hospital for 20 days, having undergone an 8-hour-long surgery where doctors placed a titanium plate and a bone graft into his skull. ALLAIRE also had to undergo surgery for his scalp to be stitched back. Apparently, the bear's tooth managed to cut into one of his lungs, but his lungs were able to recover on its own. Eventually, all 4 were able to completely recover, however, not without a few scars to remind them of their horrifying encounter with a grizzly bear. Local authorities never saw the bear after the incident. The 7 boys never got to figure their way to the train track to their instructors, but they sure did pass the ultimate survival test. Surviving a bear attack and their newly acquired skills indeed got them to safety. Thank you for making it this far. We would greatly appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button for more of our videos. If you like this video, do check out our other bear attack stories by clicking the video on the left. If you want to hear other horrifying stories, click the other video. Again, thank you and we'll see you in the next one.